Welcome back to another video where we're going to talk about homeschooling and different learning styles and how those change with their different kids. And this is really important because when you're a parent and you're trying to communicate with your child, it can be so discouraging if it feels like they're not listening or they're just not connecting with the lessons. But if we can figure out what our kids' learning styles are and play up to those preferences, then it can just make the whole lesson that much more effective and fun for everybody.
Yeah, I know that a lot of times in lecture classes when I was in the public school system, what would happen, I would just zone out and daydream, and of course the whole thing would be, oh, just pay attention. You can't pay attention if it doesn't line up with the way you learn, and then it just feels boring to you. You really do need to take into consideration how your kids actually learn to get the most out of your time and theirs.
Right. I mean, I remember being in school and feeling really anxious when the teacher would start giving instructions verbally, and I knew I would forget. And I'd really get tense and feel like, why can't they just give me a piece of paper with the written instructions, because I know I'm not going to remember everything. And come to find out, there's nothing wrong with Ammon or with me. We just, I don't know about that. We just have different learning styles that aren't auditory. And we're going to talk about what the different styles are. But first, it's important to remember also that your child, yes, they will probably have a preference of a learning style that works better for them. And they might have multiple learning styles that just don't really work for them. But it is very possible that your child has more than one learning style. And there's nothing wrong with using a whole bunch of these. And if you can, work on some of them that you feel like is a weakness to try to develop that. Because just because you're not good at that learning style doesn't mean you can't learn it. And it actually might be a valuable part of homeschool to develop those. So let's talk about the different learning styles. Let's just jump into it. The first one is visual. And I feel like personally, that's probably one of my learning styles that I prefer. It's where you learn by seeing things. So as far as lessons in school go, maps are really helpful, graphs. It can also be reading the text, that's visual. Being able to draw things out might help kids. And they also say, this isn't 100% every time, but visual learners typically are good with directions. So like they step off, and I'm looking at Ammon.
So I'm not a visual
you might not
learner.
Be. You still could be. Ammon's not good at directions.
I'm not
It's
a learner.
okay. We love him anyway. Yes, you are. So someone that's a visual learner might step off of an elevator and just instinctively know which way to turn down the hallway because they can remember.
I think I turned into a wall once.
Yeah, probably more than once.
Probably.
So visual learners could be prepared for lots of different careers. They could go into the creative arts or photography or making videos. Of course, someone with the visual learning style, any of these learning styles, could really do any profession. But I thought that was a little interesting fact that a lot of times visual learners go into the more creative things. So it's kind of cool.
The next thing that we're going to talk about is AURAL learning or oral learning. It's AURAL learning. You'll see it on the screen somewhere. Now you can go.
Okay. Thank you. So oral learning, or oral, we can't decide how to say it, it basically means listening, and specifically listening to music or rhythm or the beat. So a really good way to help connect with an oral learner in your homeschool would be like to clap with the beat while you're saying a sentence to help your child really understand and engage with that more.
Or you could say, sit down.
That too.
Be quiet.
So if you do that a lot as a parent, maybe you are an oral learner. Okay. But you could also use music to introduce the class or introduce the mood. Of course, just because someone loves music doesn't necessarily mean they're an oral learner, but it might be a good idea to try it out and see if that helps your child to learn better or to engage better with what you're learning. Another tip for oral learners is to record your instructions or your lesson or the lecture that they've been listening to and have them listen to it again later. Repetition is the mother of all learning, as my high school band director would always tell us. And so that is true, that repeating things can help someone learn. For oral learners, letting them listen to it repeatedly could be the way that helps them learn. This next learning style is the verbal learning. And it seems kind of similar to oral, but it is different. Okay. Because oral, yes, verbal is about listening again as well, but it focuses more on the words. So rather than just being about rhythm and feeling the music and the vibes you get from the mood, verbal is about the words that someone is saying. So yeah, there is some overlap. And definitely letting your kids listen to the instructions over and over again or to a recording of a lecture would help a verbal learner as well. Also, for verbal learners, this could mean reading because verbal, again, it has to do with the words. So it's not just listening to the words, but being able to read helps them comprehend the new material that they're learning as well.
Reading out loud.
Yes. Okay, so reading things out loud.
Tongue twisters.
Limericks. You looking at my list
Public
from my
speaking.
blog post. Okay, public speaking, role playing, anything that helps them use the text in interesting ways. Thank you for that, because I had forgotten all of those.
And even writing, because that gives them a chance to write down the words.
Okay. So for a verbal learner, writing is a great way to help them learn. Thanks, Ammon.
You're welcome.
The next section is about physical or kinesthetic learning. And I think that a lot of kids learn this way. Even for those kids that this isn't their preferred learning method, it can be very helpful to involve some movement with the class. So
head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
There you go. I knew you had one for me. I could feel it. So what are some other ways we've used movement with our kids?
Well, just doing sports in general, I know. I mean, that's something they catch on to really quickly if they're a mover.
Yeah.
Learn by doing. And then, get them out digging holes.
There you go. Yeah. And it could be something inside. It could be walking across the room as they learn a poem. It could be...
Turn it into a game of red light, green light, or
Yes.
stop and go, or whatever you call it.
Any kind of movement game. And again, most kids really love that kind of thing. So if you incorporate that into your lesson, then chances are your kids will have fun, they'll be engaged, and they will love learning.
And if your child, this is very important, because if it's true, as my wife thinks, that I am a physical or kinesthetic learner, they need to take breaks often to get up and move. So whatever they're learning, they need to move frequently, as this helps their brain to focus and learn the material more quickly.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so the next learning style is the logical learning style. So logical. Right?
Yep.
All right, so this has to do with math functions and some of the sciences where that child's mind is just really good at putting things in order, figuring out what's coming next or what just happened. A good way for kids to practice this skill is using games like checkers or chess. And even if you don't feel like this is one of your strong points, you can still develop that by practicing and doing some of those activities. For a logical learner, another important note is that when the child is learning something new, it's really important for them to understand why they're learning that thing. And I think I've noticed this with you as well, honey. That you've mentioned this before.
Well, that's why I left some of my classes. They
Yeah,
couldn't tell us
maybe
why.
you should explain from your point of view why it's important to know why you're learning something.
Well, I always thought it just went for everybody. If you can't see any purpose to what you're learning, you're not going to remember it. And some people are really, really stuck in that zone. They can't just do it for the grade. They can't just do it so they can go to college. They can't just do it so they can get a job. They have to understand what it is going to accomplish more short term, not just this abstract, oh, because someday down the road it's going to solve all of life's problems. You really need to attach it to something concrete.
Right.
Like, you are going to use this particular math equation every time you buy a rental property in the future. If you don't use it, you're going to lose money every time. That kind of thing.
Right.
And to show real life application.
Okay. Awesome. So, and knowing step-by-step directions is good for logical learners. And there was one more thing I was going to say.
This goes right along with computer programming, though. It's a very logical field.
Yeah.
As you have to accomplish so many different steps between points A and Z to get there, and you have to follow in a very logical way, because computer is a very logical machine. It can't do anything creative.
Right. Good. I think we'll call that good for the logical learning style.
That works for me.
And the next one is the social learning style. And that is where the child learns best in a social setting, meaning working with other people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a group setting. It can be one-on-one, where the learning occurs when they talk to somebody else and they're able to explain it or have it taught one-on-one with them. Just being able to talk through something with someone else can be really important for this kind of learner.
All right, sitting down, I have a twin brother, so it was always a really small, focused group when I was studying with him, and my mom would sit in the middle of the two of us because I was right-handed and he was left-handed, and that made it so that we can do our writing assignments better. But it helped just to be able to sit with her almost constantly to be able to work through things and sort them out, and ended up remembering them a lot better. And so it just, you hold their hand a little bit more in those circumstances.
Yeah, and that's easier to achieve in homeschool.
Yes.
That's one of the great things about having the homeschool, and you've got the siblings that they're not necessarily on the same skill level, but being able to tutor them or have your children tutor each other. We've used that before with our kids learning to read. We'll say, okay, you know how to read now. Your job is to teach your little brother.
Yep.
So that's worked. And of course, they need our help too. We're not totally off the hook with that, but social learning is very valuable. The final learning style is the opposite of social, which is solitary learning. And that is where sometimes there are kids that just do better when they're on their own and they can sit down with the book and teach themselves the new material. And in those situations, homeschool is great too, because that's really hard to do in a public school setting. You're kind of forced to learn as a group there. So that's one of the great advantages to homeschool, is we can accommodate our solitary learners. And providing books is probably the number one way to help these kids to learn. And it's being respectful, I think, of their need to be private and alone is also very important for them. Okay, with solitary learners, it's also important to remember to stay engaged with them as a parent. You still want to be in touch with them and ask them questions and figure out how they're feeling, because they might not necessarily share those things with you because they're a solitary person. You can provide a journal to give them a chance to write about how they're feeling and what they're learning. And there's tons of resources online too, and you can teach them how to find good and truthful ways to find information, and that can be valuable for them too, so they can learn things on their own, because for some people that's just their preferred way of learning. So
Otherwise they're just learning how to play cards.
Solitaire?
Oh, it's not solitary?
No, it's just solitaire.
Oh.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us for this video about the learning styles that different people might have, and your learning style might differ from your kids, and so just kind of be aware of that so that you can make sure to provide learning experiences that work for your kids, and to be sensitive about the things that are harder for them and still work on it so that they can improve in all the different areas, and you can do the same as well. But I appreciate Ammon being with me here for this video today. Thanks, Ammon.
You're welcome.
And we hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.